right here in exciting El Paso, Texas, gateway to the Old West, the most haunted city in the country. Well, today is January 21st, 21st day of the new year. 344 days remain to the end of the year. It's also the first full day of President Trump's new period in office. And from looking at the news, the lunatics are coming out of the closets. He went to a church service where the bishop, female type, took him to task for keeping his promise to the American voters. Wanted him not to do anything about the undocumented immigrants because they had every right to be here. The fact that it's contrary to the law, notwithstanding. Well, this is promises to be a fiery first week. And today is National Cheesy Socks Day. Well, you get to transform your sock game with outrageously hilarious novelty socks. Make your feet fancy. National Hugging Day. Hug somebody today. National Granola Bar Day. National Squirrel Appreciation Day. With their bushy tails and quick movements, they're a joy to watch as they scamper through the trees and hunt for nuts and do weird stuff. It's One-Liners Day. International Playdate Day. International Sweatpants Day. National Hyaluronic Acid Day. It's a moisture boosting element for your skin. Offers a rejuvenating touch for radiant and supple skin. It's Soup Swap Day. Nothing better than a warm bowl of homemade soup on a chilly day. And here in West Texas, it was 35 degrees at 1 o'clock. Energy Saving Week. Farmhouse Breakfast Week. Cancer Talk Week. No Name Calling Week. National Fresh Squeezed Juice Week. World Kiwanis Week. Hunt for Happiness Week. Week of Prayer for Christian Unity. Snow Sculpting Week. People born on this date: Gina Davis, Paul Allen. January 21st is also part of January. Dry January. Manuary, where you get to embrace your inner lumberjack. National Blood Donor Month. Veganary. Plant-based eating can be delicious and healthy, so I am told. Thyroid Awareness Month. National Birth Defects Awareness Month. Cervical Cancer Awareness Month. National Slow Cooking Month. Bread Machine Baking Month. National Clean Up Your Computer Month. And National Brain Teaser Month. National Be On Purpose Month. National Clean Up Your IRS Act Month. National Skating Month. National Soup Month. Fresh Florida Tomato Month. National CBD Month. Apple and Apricot Month. National Hobby Month. National Oatmeal Month. National Bass Safety Month. Clap for Health Month. National Poverty in America Awareness Month. National Black Diamond Month. Get a Balanced Life Month. Get Organized Month. For many years I carried a organizer in my briefcase, and I'd write down everything. International Creativity Month, Celebration of Life Month, National Be Kind to Food Servers Month, and National Hot Tea Month. All that having been said, in 763, following the Battle of Balkamra between Alids and Abbasids near Kufa, the Alid rebellion ends with the death of Ibrahim, brother of the Isa ibn Musa. 1525, the Swiss Anabaptist movement is founded when Conrad Grebel, Felix Marx, Felix Manz, George Blowrock, and about a dozen others baptized each other in the homes of Manz's mother in Zurich, breaking a 1,000-year tradition of church-state union. 1535, following the affair of the placards, the French king leads an anti-Protestant procession through Paris. Just got an email. What's an Anabaptist? It's a Christian movement that traces its origin to the radical Reformation of the 16th century. Anabaptists believe that baptism is valid only when candidates freely confess their faith in Christ and request to be baptized. Commonly referred to as the believer's baptism, it's opposed to baptism of infants who are not able to make a conscious decision to be baptized. The early Anabaptists formulated their beliefs in a confession of faith in 1527 called the Schleitheim Confession. Its author, Michael Sattler, was arrested and executed shortly after that. Basically, it's you might refer to them as rebels without a cause. 1720, Sweden and Prussia signed the Treaty of Stockholm. 1749, the Teatro Filarmonico of Verona is destroyed by fire as a result of a torch being left behind in the box of a nobleman after a performance. It was rebuilt in 1754. 1774, Abdul Hamid I becomes Sultan of the Ottoman Empire and Caliph of Islam. 1789, the first American novel, The Power of Sympathy or The Triumph of Nature, Founded in Truth by William Hill Brown, is printed in Boston. 1793, after being found guilty of treason by the French National Convention, Louis XVI of France is executed on this date by guillotine. 1854, the RMS Taylor sinks off Lamprey Island on her maiden voyage from Liverpool to Australia with a great loss of life. 1893, the Tate Concessions land, formerly part of Matabele land, is formally annexed to the Bechuanaland Protectorate, now Botswana. 1908, New York City passes the Sullivan Ordinance, making it illegal for women to smoke in public, only to have the measure vetoed by the mayor. Under his view, women could smoke anywhere. 1911, the first Monte Carlo Rally takes place on this date. 1915, Kiwanis International is founded in Detroit. 1919, Revolutionary Irish Parliament is founded and declares independence of the Irish Republic. One of the first engagements of the Irish War of Independence takes place on this date. 1925, Albania declares itself a republic. 1931, Sir Isaac Isaacs, sworn in as the first Australian-born Governor-General of Australia. 1932, Finland and the Soviet Union signed a non-aggression treaty. 1941, sparked by the murder of a German officer in Bucharest, Romania. The day before, members of the Iron Guard engaged in a rebellion and killed 125 Jews. Iron Guard was a Romanian militant revolutionary religious fascist movement and also a political party, founded in 1927 by Corneliu Zeleu Codreanu. It was founded originally as the Legion of the Archangel Michael, or the Legionary Movement, strongly anti-democratic, anti-capitalist, anti-communist, and anti-Semitic. It was deeply imbued with the Romanian Orthodox Christian mysticism. Supposedly, none of the members could immigrate to this country after World War II, but under Operation Paperclip, files were changed. And fact, the doctor who did my out-processing physical for the military was a member of the Iron Guard. The mere fact he'd been found incompetent by a federal court was neither here nor there. And he caused a lot of problems to a lot of people. But you have to understand that things happen. 1942, the Jewish Resistance Organization, Vereinigte Partisaner Organization, based in the Vilna Ghetto, was established. 1943, as part of Operation Animals, British SOE saboteurs destroy the railway bridge over the Esopus River, and guerrillas of the Greek People's Liberation Army ambush and destroy a German convoy at the Battle of Saratoporos. 1948, flag of Quebec is adopted and flown for the first time over the National Assembly of Quebec. This date's marked annually as Quebec Flag Day. 1950, American lawyer and government official Alger Hiss is convicted of perjury. He was accused in 1948 of having spied for the Soviet Union in the 1930s. Now, of course, the statute of limitations had expired for espionage, but so instead they convicted him of perjury in connection with this charge in 1950. Now, before trial, he was involved in the establishment of the United Nations, both as a U.S. State Department official and a UN official. Later in his life, he worked as a lecturer and author. August 3rd, 1948, Whittaker Chambers, a former Communist Party USA member, testified under subpoena before the House Un-American Activities Committee that Hiss had secretly been a communist while in federal service. Hiss, of course, denied the charge and subsequently sued Chambers for libel. But during the pretrial discovery process of the libel case, Chambers produced new evidence allegedly indicating he and Hiss had been involved in espionage. So a federal grand jury indicted Hiss on 2 counts of perjury. Well, when the federal government wants to get you, little things like statute of limitations are just annoyances, as we saw in the Trump trial. 1951, a catastrophic eruption of Mount Lamington in Papua New Guinea claimed 2,942 lives. 1954, the first nuclear-powered submarine, USS Nautilus, is launched in Groton, Connecticut by Mamie Eisenhower, who at the time was the first lady of the United States. 1960, Little Joe 1B, a Mercury spacecraft, lifts off from Wallops Island, Virginia, with Miss Sam, a female rhesus monkey, on board. 1960, Avianca Flight 671 crashes in Montego Bay, Jamaica, at the airport at Montego Bay, Jamaica. Killed 37 people. 1960, also saw a coal mine collapse at Holly Country, South Africa. Killed 435 miners. 1963, the Chicago, North Shore, and Milwaukee Railroad ends operation. 1968, Vietnam War, Battle of Khe Sanh. It's one of the most publicized and controversial battles of the war and began on this date. 1968, a B-52 bomber crashes near Toole Air Force Base, contaminating the area with its nuclear payload ruptured. One of the 4 bombs remains unaccounted for after the cleanup operations is complete. I don't think it's been found yet. 1971, the current Emily Moore transmitting station, the tallest freestanding structure in the UK, began transmitting UHF broadcasts on this date. 1976, commercial service of Concorde begins with the London, Bahrain, and Paris-Rio routes. 1980, Iran Air Flight 291 crashes in the Alborz Mountains while on approach to Mehrabad International Airport in Tehran, Iran. Killed 128 people. 1981, production of the DeLorean sports car begins in Dunmurry, Northern Ireland in the UK. 1985, Galaxy Airlines Flight 203 crashes near Reno Tahoe International Airport in Reno, Nevada. Kills 70 people. 1997, U.S. House of Representatives voted 395 to 28 to reprimand Newt Gingrich for ethics violations. That made him the first Speaker of the House to be so disciplined. 1999, War on Drugs. One of the largest drug busts in American history. The U.S. Coast Guard intercepts a ship with over 4,300 kilograms of cocaine on board. That was about 9,500 pounds. That was quite a number of millions of dollars. In 2000, Ecuador, after the Ecuadorian Congress is seized by indigenous organizations, Colonel Lucio Guterres, Carlos Solorzano, and Antonio Vargas deposed President Jamil Mahoud. Guterres is later replaced by General Carlos Mendoza, who resigns and allows Vice President Gustavo Noboa to succeed Mahoud. 2003, a 7.6 magnitude earthquake strikes the Mexican state of Colima, killed 29, left about 10,000 people homeless. 2004, NASA's MER-8, the Mars rover Spirit, ceases communication with Mission Control. Problem lies in the management of its flash memory and is fixed remotely from Earth on February 6th. 2005, in Belmopan, Belize, the unrest over the government's new taxes erupts into riots. 2009, Israel withdraws from the Gaza Strip, officially ending a 3-week war it had with Hamas. However, intermittent fire by both sides continues in the weeks to follow, until we get to today, when they were stomped almost to extinction until they came out of hiding to make a statement by escorting the 3 hostages released to the release point, in uniform, I might add. 2011, anti-government demonstrations take place in Tirana, Albania. 4 people died from gunshots allegedly fired from armed police protecting the Prime Minister's office. 2014, Rojava conflict. The Jazeera Canton declares its autonomy from the Syrian Arab Republic. 2017, over 400 cities across America and 160 countries worldwide participate in a large-scale women's march on Donald Trump's first full day as President of the United States. There was an attempt to redo that yesterday, and it kind of fizzled out. 2023, Who Can Tron 72 opened fire in a dance studio in Monterey Park, California. Killed 11 people and injured 9 others before later committing suicide. It was the worst mass shooting in Los Angeles County since the 2008 Covina massacre. You know, the question is, what did you hope to accomplish? None of them ever articulate the reason for their lunatic acts. Well, Arizona's legislature is considering legislation to ensure the key border state cooperates with the mass deportation push by the new Trump administration, amid questions about the extent to which states will aid the government. Other locales are stating that they're going to fight the federal government tooth and nail. That was tried before. It was called the Civil War. Trump is trying to carry out his campaign promises. As I said at the top of the show, he went to a church service today where the bishop who held sway, who had been a protester against Trump in his first administration, went on a tirade about protecting the undocumented immigrants, which I think was wildly inappropriate for a church service. Well, while Trump pardoned everybody except his dog, there are 4 he didn't pardon. And those 4, I'm sure, are afraid they're going to face issues. Because we all know what goes around comes around. First one he didn't pardon was Jack Smith, a special counsel who apparently wasn't appointed correctly. He spent 2 years at the Department of Justice, most of it going after Trump. He sought to wage 2 federal cases against him, but he resigned last week and, by all accounts, fled the country. In a report issued earlier this month ahead of Trump's inauguration, Smith asserted, with respect to both Mr. Trump's unprecedented efforts to unlawfully retain power after losing the 2020 election and his unlawful retention of classified documents after leaving office, the principles of federal prosecution compel prosecution. Now, I'd point out that it was determined that Joe Biden retained classified documents in his garage sitting next to his convertible. But special counsel decided that was okay because he was an elderly man whose memory wasn't that great, but he was serving as president. The second one was Alvin Bragg. Legal experts have cited the New York versus Trump case as one of the worst cases in history. Alvin Bragg brought a case that led to a jury finding Trump guilty of charges by falsifying business records. Of course, they were not used as a basis for anything. And the judge didn't even require there be a unanimous verdict. Judge Juan Matron, that Trump called corrupt, deeply conflicted, Democratic-appointed acting judge, claimed the judge was aiming to rig the Manhattan sham trial. And ahead of Trump's inauguration as president, Meacham sentenced Trump to an unconditional discharge. Trump-related election interference case. But Biden pardoned anybody and everybody he could. The problem is a preemptive pardon may well be overturned by the courts. Well, Trump's deportation program got started yesterday at about the same time he's being sworn in. Trump border czar Tom Homan revealed ICE teams are... Well, as you might guess, the left has lost its tiny little mind. He signed an executive order yesterday doing away with anchor babies. If the mother's here illegally and the father's not legal, being born here doesn't grant automatic citizenship for the baby. Well, he was sued this morning, claiming that violated the 14th Amendment. We'll see what the court has to say. And the migrant caravans are still on their way to the border, even though they're going to be turned away. Trump is going to reinstall the Wait in Mexico rule. The prayer service ambush was totally uncalled for. And if the powers that be in the church don't take action, there may be a backlash. Marco Rubio was interviewed by NBC Today host who took him to task for Trump pardoning folks convicted for the so-called January 6th revolt. Yes, fire has broken out near the Fashion Valley Mall in San Diego. There's a 1,500-mile winter storm that has blanketed the South in snow all the way from Texas to Florida. As I said earlier, it was 35 degrees here at 1 o'clock. An ex-Obama aide named John Favreau said that the Democrats lost the election because they don't listen to the voters. They're so sure that their way is the only way that they don't bother to listen. Trump has been urged to pardon his 76-year-old grandmother and a number of others who went to prison for pro-life activism. There are 21 activists who were arrested for marching in favor of pro-life. Louisiana, Ohio, Kansas, and West Virginia are suing over illegal migrants being counted in the census. Trump's new acting EEOC chair, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission chair, is going to address unlawful DEI-motivated workplace discrimination. And certainly there is a lot of that. Let's see. And the House Republicans are pushing to repeal the law that Biden used to go after pro-life activists. Trump has also already fired the Coast Guard commandant over border lapses, recruitment failures, and DEI focus. And I think DEI is going to be a thing of the past. Another dead woman's been found on the New York City subway. Well, let's see. Is there anything else? Trump, who's been credited with the successful signing of a ceasefire deal between Hezbollah, Hamas, and Israel, doesn't really believe it's going to hold. And I think he's probably right. All right. Well, that's it on our little news segment. We've been talking about soldier spirits and ghost planes and other strange happenings related to World War II. Well, yesterday I talked about a ghost plane that some folks associate with Pearl Harbor, even though the plane was seen in California. Now, there was a better documented air crash a year later. December 7th, 1941 was Pearl Harbor, the Japanese attack. But there was another crash December 8th, 1942. And even that 42 incident is steeped in mystery. Now, according to the best I can find out, the strange event began on a quiet evening in December of 42. Skies were overcast. For Californians, a year of war footing dissipated a lot of the panic that gripped the coast after the Japanese elite blasted their way through the country's prized naval base. But there was, of course, a watchful wariness. Radar operators were scanning their scopes. That was part of the watchfulness, I guess you could say. That evening, they noticed something strange on their radar scopes. A blip appeared on the eastern edge of the screen that seemed to represent an aircraft heading toward the American coast. And two fighters were scrambled to meet it. As the two planes bore down on that bogey, as it was called, they Replied to the radar team it didn't resemble the Japanese plane heading toward the coast, looking like a USP-40 fighter plane. And one of the pilots radioed that that mystery plane was considerably shot up. And it had strange markings. They were old. In fact, those markings hadn't appeared on an American aircraft since the attack on Pearl Harbor. As they got closer to trying to make a visual contact with the pilot, they saw that the landing gear had been shot off. The question became, how did the plane take off without landing gear? The plane's pilot was obviously injured. When you saw a friendly aircraft next to him, the pilot of the shot-up aircraft waved and smiled. Then he banked and screamed toward the ground. The interceptor pilots watched the P-40 crash. Officials organized a search team and headed toward the crash site. And they did find the crashed plane. But they didn't find the pilot. He'd vanished. Now, he did leave a diary that managed to survive that crash. According to his handwriting in the diary, he was stranded on Mindanao, an island about 1,300 miles away. Now, nowhere in the diary did he mention how he managed to get off the desolate island. Maybe he was shot down on the island and found a way to repair his plane well enough to take off. But critics say that getting a heavy P-40 airborne without landing gear is really baffling. The odds would be against it. But for American airmen who faced the brutal odds of beating back the Japanese Empire in those dark days, they say overcoming massive challenges and long odds aren't impossible. It's just a day of hard work. Out on the perimeter of the air base in Belgium, a particularly keen-eyed anti-aircraft gun crew squatting down in the sandbag-filled ditch in the middle of a grassy field watched the horizon for any sign of German planes. And the rumble of aircraft engines caused them to stir and start really scanning the sky. Now, the newer gunners were, of course, on edge, but the older vets could tell just by the sound of the incoming aircraft it was one of theirs. It was a friendly, not a bogey. And sure enough, the black dot on the horizon gradually became a silhouette and took the shape of an American B-17 bomber. And everyone breathed a sigh of relief as this plane, wheels down, perfectly maneuvered into position to land. And from their vantage point, a hole in the ground along the pockmarked grassy plain, the gun crew watched that bomber make a perfect landing and roll to the edge of the tarmac, just as inbound planes normally did. Bounced a couple of times and grew closer to their position, and one wing dipped to the ground, and that's when the gun crew began to murmur. Was everything okay? Was this an emergency landing? The plane eventually stopped just a few yards from the gun position. And once the plane made this abrupt, unconventional stop, the watching personnel noticed something else strange. For starters, the bomber crew didn't exit the B-17. If the crew had experienced problems aboard the plane, some type of emergency, there didn't seem to be any sign of any urgency from the crew to get off the plane. And the threat of a fuel explosion, at the very least, would prompt crews to rush out of the plane as soon as they could. In fact, that's what they were trained to do. But they didn't open the doors or the hatches to escape. Nothing. No ladders dropped from the openings. Bomber just sat there at the end of the runway. Well, as you might guess, emergency crews rushed to the scene. As they got closer, they didn't see any signs of battle damage. They thought perhaps if gunfire raked the plane, injuring but not killing the crew, maybe the weakened crew managed to pilot the crippled aircraft back to base. Of course, there was one problem. with that theory. They didn't see any obvious battle damage. But the mystery was deep when the emergency crews examined the outside of the plane. Things got downright weird when they entered the bomber. Now, the normal crew of a B-17 was at least 10. But as they searched the plane, they didn't find any sign of the 10 or so men that crewed that bomber. No pilot, no co-pilot, no gunners, no navigator, no bombardier. And even more weird, no signs of any type of trauma that could be found inside the plane. No blood, no tissue, no injured bodies. So how did it get there? Somehow, a completely pilotless, complex flying fortress, a plane that takes hundreds of hours to learn how to fly and hundreds more to learn how to operate as a team, had flown or even more mind-bogglingly completed a complex landing maneuver without a pilot or a crew on board. So they immediately called an investigator. The officer in charge of the investigation, who was a major, was more shocked than the first responders. He saw nearly everything was intact. In fact, the navigator's log still sat there undisturbed in the plane. One single entry, bad flak. Following from the report that the major filed. Now, I've got a few excerpts from it. He said, "We now made a thorough search, and our most remarkable find in the fuselage was about a dozen parachutes neatly wrapped and ready for clipping on. This made the whereabouts of the crew even more mysterious. The Sperry bomb sight remained in the perspex nose, quite undamaged, with its cover neatly folded beside it. Back on the navigator's desk was the code book, giving the colors and letters of the day for identification purposes. Various fur-lined flying jackets lay in the fuselage together with a few bars of chocolate, partly consumed in some cases. The near perfect condition of the craft allowed the investigator to track down where the plane came from and begin to put together a weird story. Based on the information he uncovered, the plane was part of a mission to bomb targets at the Mersburg oil complex. Now, the mission for this bomber seemed doomed from the beginning. Could barely keep up with the rest of the bomber fleet. Then the bomb rack malfunctioned and they couldn't jettison their load, which increased the struggle of the aircraft to maintain its speed and stay in formation. See, the problem was a B-17 all alone in the sky would be an easy target for a prowling Nazi pilot. And aircraft crews in the heavily protected Mersburg area zeroed in on the slower and lower bomber. One shot of flak knocked out the number 3 engine, another one hit the bomb bay door. With all the munitions still on board, the crew considered it a mystery the whole plane didn't blow up. Well, limping back to England just wasn't in the cards, the pilot realized. His goal was to keep the crew safe and make sure the bomber didn't fall into enemy hands. So he swung the plane toward Allied control Belgium and ordered the crew to bail out. It was later found that the crew had survived and were eventually rescued. At this point, however, the investigator could only speculate that some sort of miracle occurred after the crew abandoned their ship. Malfunctioning engine must have been restarted. Landing gear must have come on. Automatic pilot set by the actual pilot must have maneuvered the plane along a trajectory toward the RAF air base and set up nearly perfectly. The landing. Another mystery continued to be debated, though. Why were there still parachutes on board the plane? Maybe the crew just carried some extra ones or brought along empty parachute packs. This account of the Phantom Flying Fortress may actually be just one of several reports of planes that flew themselves during the war. Aviation experts say that aeronautical engineers designed these planes to fly, and they kept flying even when people abandoned them. Others, with a more metaphysical bent, might believe this never-say-die B-17 could never have piloted it itself into a landing. They say this bomber, as well as the other warbirds that managed to take care of themselves without a crew, are piloted by spirit forces who bring them safely to the ground. Certainly, that is not beyond the realm of possibility, but that would not be my first suggestion. You know, if the skies are crowded with ghost planes, you might guess there are air bases that served as an important role in waging the war. Air war and World War II have their own supernatural legacy. And if that was your belief, then looks like you might be right. Other occult experts consider World War II era air bases and airfields, some of which are still in use today, and some of which have been abandoned, are actually extremely haunted locations. And a study will show that some of the hauntings are anchored in certain buildings, particularly buildings with a history of violence and death and mayhem. You know, Pearl Harbor is arguably the most haunted piece of property on the Hawaiian Islands. Ghosts haunt the Arizona Memorial and the harbor itself. But the harbor isn't the only spot hit by the Japanese attack. It isn't the only spot for ongoing supernatural attacks. One of the key objectives of the Japanese bombing runs, Oahu's Hickam Air Base, is also a target of paranormal activity. According to numerous witnesses who've served at or visited the base. You know, numbers vary, but most records suggest that about 190 people died in the attack on Hickam. Most paranormal theorists suggest that the damage, the death, and tragedy increase the likelihood of supernatural encounters. And there does seem to be a long history of ghost stories and ghost lore that stretches back to that pivotal first moment of World War II. And some of these stories come from the many service members who lived in, worked on, and guarded that particular base. We're going to start out talking about an Air Force security specialist. Said one shift in a building rumored to be the most haunted property on the base was enough to convince him of the base's paranormal legacy. He went on a website called Your Ghost Stories and wrote about his adventures. He was assigned to work in the 12th Air Force Headquarters building, which, according to his sources, served as a temporary morgue right after the 1941 attack. On his first shift at 3 in the morning, a typical time for paranormal activity to occur, the building seemed to come alive. Alarms started to ring out. The highly sensitive motion sensors began to detect presences, and a special response team came in to investigate. One witness decided he'd follow along with the special response team as backup. He said everybody seemed to be a bit on edge, and for a bunch of guys who trained each day to take on any security challenge that might come along, this struck him as odd. Another aspect of the operation stood out to him. Even as a trainee, he knew that the team should clear the building, that is, go through it room by room and ensure the building is secure. Protocol required they check every nook and corner of a building when looking for a possible intruder, but this particular special response team was in no hurry to investigate. They just walked directly to the alarm control panel and shut it off and entered the incident in their log. When the witness traveled back to his headquarters, he asked his training officer, who was a sergeant, about the incident why the team didn't bother clearing the building. Well, the answer he got surprised him. At least it prepared him for the remaining days of his paranormal adventure while stationed at Hickam. He was explaining the alarm routinely sounded between 3 and 3:30 in the morning. Even though the system was checked and rechecked, no mechanical problems were ever found, the alarm continued to be triggered by some unknown, unseen force. And for most of the officers who experienced it, and these are some cold, skeptical, evidence-seeking investigators, the cause of these alarms could only be described as anomalous, or perhaps paranormal. And there was more. The sergeant asked his subordinate if he ever wondered why there was a guard shack posted outside the building. Normally the guards are posted inside the building. When new to the base, the airman had never even considered the guard shack was out of place until the sergeant called it to his attention. And then the light went on. The sergeant was right. CQ desk, or what's called charger quarters, universally placed inside the building. And usually those desks are staffed 24 hours a day to monitor traffic coming in and out of the facility. Indeed, it's definitely weird that the guards sat outside the building and not any of that particular building, not any of the other barracks on the base. Before the airman could answer, his training officer filled him in on the reason for this anomaly. He said they moved the guards outside the building because the strange activity inside the building was just too weird and disconcerting. In fact, it defeated the purpose of stationing guards in the facility when the events they experienced in the building continually distracted the guards and had them on edge. Then the sergeant read a list of reports that had triggered officials to move the CQ desk. Some guards said they could hear people walking down the halls. When they went to confront the intruders, they found no signs of life in those empty halls. Even heard people talking when the building theoretically was deserted. And these audible sensations were nothing. Other people reported smelling a horrendous scent like rotting flesh. For some soldiers, it could be just a weird and uncomfortable annoyance, but for the witnesses who knew about the facility's role as a morgue and a hospital during the Pearl Harbor attack, that smell is deeply disturbing. Well, a set of stairs in the building would also shake uncontrollably, almost as if some heavy yet invisible weight was pressing down on them. Probably wasn't hard for those who experienced this phenomenon to imagine it as the effect of soldiers, sailors, and rescue workers running up and down those stairs trying to save the lives of the wounded by bringing them out of harm's way during the battle. According to the guard, the spirits wasted no time before introducing themselves to him. On his first shift, the witness experienced the full range of paranormal activities the sergeant had briefed him about. He heard the sounds of people walking and talking and the sounds of soldiers rushing up and down the stairs. And at 3:17 in the morning, during his first shift, the motion detector rang out, signaling presences on both the basement level and the third floor at the same time. Now, certainly the equipment could malfunction, but for two separate alarms to sound at the same time would be quite a coincidence. But he did his duty. He went and looked for intruders. But he knew deep down that since the building had been secured at 5 p.m. the previous afternoon, he wouldn't find anybody. Anybody living, that is. Well, his check confirmed his belief. No one anywhere near the building at the time of night, let alone in it. And this event became the first of many to be added to the guard's list of strange encounters during his time at Hickam. Guard dogs, not creatures known to back down from their duties, are often refused to enter the building, or they would only do so after great coaxing from their handlers. They'd whimper and growl or hide behind their handlers, which was highly unusual for these type of creatures. He also noted on other bases, soldiers and airmen regularly returned to their officers to catch up on work at night, but not at Hickam. After 5 p.m., the building stood vacant. After a while, though, this guard began to understand. Even some of America's bravest service members considered it an unnerving place to work. Now, this security specialist joined dozens of others who experienced inexplicable events at Hickam Field. Some report seeing water faucets turning on and off by themselves. Others have seen weird glowing shapes walking through the halls and up and down the steps. And some of those witnesses who came to Hickam, either as skeptics or simply indifferent to or ignorant about paranormal powers, by the time they left, they were total believers. Well, at the time of the attack on Pearl Harbor, Schofield Barracks was home to two newly formed Army divisions, 24th and the 25th. December 7, 1941, the military base found itself in the sights of Japanese pilots. The base's proximity to Wheeler Army Airfield made the barracks a tempting target for strafing Japanese planes and an intended target of bombs that were meant for the airfield. Schofield became another grisly scene of destruction and carnage. Like Hickam and other places in Pearl Harbor, it's now the site of a number of paranormal events. One woman submitted her paranormal encounter to the Army Wife 101 website. Said she had a direct encounter with a full-bodied apparition in one of those martial spirits. According to what she said, she was house sitting for her brother while he was deployed to Iraq. Almost immediately, she realized something was amiss in the house. Doors had unexpectedly slammed shut, and she couldn't find any natural reason, like a draft or a faulty hinge. Then the TV began to turn itself on and off. Maybe it was a broken remote control, or maybe the neighbor's control was interfering with her television, but then the activity escalated. Said she went to bed one night, keeping her door open so she could hear her young daughter, who slept in the next room. And suddenly, at exactly 3:31 in the morning, she woke up. Now, you have to remember, the 3 to 3:30 time frame was just mentioned in the story about Hickam Field. That was she remembered the exact time what happened that night, because what happened next was so deeply disturbing that the time was etched on her memory. And it wasn't so much when she woke up, but how she woke up that was even more disturbing. It was a raspy voice that echoed through the room. She stood up and looked towards the door. Standing in the entryway was a soldier decked out in World War II era garb. And he looked at her and he said, "Get out." Now, once the initial shock disappeared, and despite the command, the woman said she didn't fear the apparition. She was what she termed an empath, somebody who would sense the emotions or mental states of other people, even that of a dead person. In the paranormal community, the powers of an empath are said to extend beyond the ability to connect with living beings, but also to those who passed away. Woman must have sensed the spirit wasn't there to frighten her out of her brother's house, but possibly to warn her. Maybe this was the spirit reliving the Pearl Harbor attack. If so, his command to get out may have been more of a command to seek safety and avoid the bombs that were falling on the base. In any case, the woman in the spirit had an old-fashioned stare-down. She refused to budge and eventually told the ghost, "I'm not leaving. This is my house." As soon as she said that, the ghost disappeared. And when he did, both her bedroom door and the door of the room her daughter was sleeping in were slammed shut simultaneously. And the ghost vanished. But for this resident of Schofield Base, as well as dozens of other witnesses to Pearl Harbor's paranormal legacy, the ghosts and the spirits who remained after the vicious attack on the U.S. soil may vanish temporarily, but they haven't gone away permanently. Checking out some official displays of America's World War II aerial might is on your historic must-see list. You'll probably want to travel to Wright-Patterson Airfield and visit the National Museum of the United States Air Force. And maybe ask them about the UFOs they're said to have hidden there. And it just so happens you might, if you want a chance to see the spectral might of World War II warbirds, Wright-Patterson near Dayton, Ohio is the place to go. These many workers and visitors say it's the most haunted military museum in the U.S. Maybe the most haunted museum, period. Folks have witnessed the whole 9 yards of supernatural happenings there, including an oft-repeated tale that apparitions of pilots continue to appear to controls of their aircraft and quite often stalk the halls of the museum. Paranormal activity seems to center on a few of the aircraft on display, and it's generally the World War II planes in particular. And as you might expect, the big bombers that unleashed the most amount of damage to the enemy seem to be the most haunted. Well, the B-24 Liberators on display at the museum are among the best-loved exhibits. The museum has at least 2 of the bombers that became famous for their long-range attacks during the war, including those at Ploesti oil fields in Romania, where Nazi forces received most of the oil to fuel their war machine. And they're both haunted. Displays are so popular because of the stories attached to these warbirds, some of which are actually ghost stories. One Liberator, nicknamed the Strawberry Bitch, which probably doesn't hurt its popularity among visitors, has a haunted reputation that's just as saucy as its moniker. And pinup nose art suggests. In fact, it might be the pinup girl immortalized on the plane's surface who's behind some of the more aggressive paranormal strikes against men trying to get fresh with her. Some witnesses have the marks and the scars to prove it. Well, this extended range of Liberator was ideal for missions over vast stretches of the Pacific as well. The Strawberry Bitch, one of more than 18,000 Liberators the U.S. produced, flew in combat missions over the deserts of North Africa during 43 and 44. In 1959, pilots flew her to the museum, and the tales of ghostly activity began soon after that. People say as they approach the display, they can see a strange light moving around in the craft. According to other reports, the entire interior of the plane seems to illuminate with a soft glow. Debunkers quickly surmised the effects were related to subtle changes in lighting. Staff and visitors, though, said they witnessed things that had nothing to do with lighting. There were rattles and cranks in gunner's undercarriage. When the witnesses checked to find who was making the racket, there was never anybody there. And the ghost makes its presence known in much more physical ways. One worker made a very startling claim. He said he's working the night shift, and it was nice and quiet typically, but something about the quiet unnerved him and made this shift not so nice for him. Most of the workers said that there was something unsettling about the silence in the museum at night, almost like the paranormal powers at work in the facility were building up their energy. In this case, the man didn't have long to wait for the power to manifest itself. Janitors were working near the Strawberry Bitch. He sensed a presence. And out of nowhere, he felt the sharp sting of a slap across his face. Wildly, he sprung around and tried to locate the source of that blow, but couldn't find anything. No noise, like the sounds of footsteps of a prankster making a hasty retreat from the scene of the crime. All alone, with only silence and fear as his constant companions, he was forced to contemplate the stinging encounter with the supernatural. No clues to what precipitated the attack. Maybe the spirit of the saucy nose art pinup didn't like being stared at. And there's no word of how long the janitor stayed on the staff at the museum. Certainly an attack like that can make you rethink your career choices. But the janitor wasn't the only witness who was in the receiving end of some paranormal punishment. A group of women who were part of the night cleaning crew said that some force attacked them. They claimed that someone or something pulled their hair whenever they were in the plane. Sometimes they claimed it wasn't even they didn't even climb aboard to suffer abuse. They said if they even got close to the Strawberry Bitch, they'd sometimes feel the force pulling on their hair. Well, on that note, we come to the end of today's show. We'll be back tomorrow and talk about more aerial ghost. Until then, this is Ken Hudnall for the Ken Hudnall Show saying have a truly great evening.